Okay, great. So, thank you very much. We have technology. Everyone's here. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speakers. We have Casey Hardison and Charlotte Walsh here with us. Can you guys see everybody?
Yeah.
Well, everybody.
Most of them. You probably needs little introduction. Casey is a man of multi-dimensional intrigue and interest. Casey, you're frozen. Well, I'm going to let these guys tell you their story, and Charlotte will be interviewing Casey, so I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Hi, Casey.
Hi, Shirley.
Okay. So I thought perhaps you would like to start off by telling us how you were journey towards becoming a psychedelic chemist.
Well, my journey to becoming a psychedelic chemist, obviously starts with my birth, but I had some really unusual freedoms in childhood. I grew up on a sailboat in the Pacific for quite a number of years, and went to school for a few years and then wound up on a canoe trip from Idaho to New Orleans, buckskins, flintlock rifle, handmade cedar canoe, surviving off the land. And then from there, I left home at about the age of 15. Dropped out of school and went on Grateful Dead tour. But strangely enough, I was actually sober. Somehow I got it in my head that I had childhood addiction issues. And I was sober on Dead tour. So I actually didn't wind up taking acid until I was 22 back home in Idaho. A friend of mine who had been on Dead tour with me, clean and sober, decided it was time for us to do some acid. And my first experience was incredibly numinous. I was bowled over and blown away. I had no idea what had happened to me. But sometime in that night, I actually struck on the idea of wanting to find out what had happened to me. So I decided to go to school the next day after I had dropped out of high school. But luckily, I was able to get in, and at school, rather than dropping out, I dropped in, and at school I studied everything I could possibly get anthropology, biology, chemistry, biochemistry, botany. I just went for whatever would give me information about the experiences of psychedelics throughout time and my own. And I read a large amount of literature, and that's where it started.
And how did you go from that point, from that kind of point of learning to actually becoming a chemist? What was the...
The last semester I was at University of Idaho, I talked to the anthropology department head to give me a grant to attend the ethnobotany seminars in Palenque, Mexico. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but it was fantastic. I got there, and a lot of people were actually taking 2CT7, a fairly novel entheogenic phenethylamine psychedelic. And the fact that so many people were taking it I knew right then and there that I could get information by just asking a survey, right? So I took my laptop and I wrote up a survey, and I talked to Sasha about what questions to ask, and we came up with one. Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies agreed to publish it in their summer 2000 bulletin, and somebody read it. And that guy read it, sent me a letter saying, eventually saying, after a couple of letters, saying I used to make these things up until 1986 when the Analog Act came in America. Would you like a laboratory? And I'm like, yes.
Given a lab.
Yeah, so I was able to roll into his place and drive away with nearly a complete laboratory. And from there, it just started. I started with I made 2CD first, which is basically a pharmacological tofu, and I had the material and know how to get that far, and that's where I started.
And what's it like? I mean, most of us haven't experienced that. What's it like being a chemist? What's the reality?
The reality of chemistry is it is sincerely effortful and mindful work. You have to be very precise about your reagents, your ingredients, your reaction times, all sorts of things, so that at the end of the process, you have a molecule that is as clean as possible, as pure as possible, recrystallized. I mean, at one point I even flew a friend over from the States so that he could sing to my crystals as they were crystallizing out of the liquid solution, becoming solidified in an environment that had just incredible vibrations flowing through it. Beautiful music.
Did it work?
I'm certain it worked. It was the pink stuff. the gratitude and excitement of being able to share my molecules with others and eat them myself is just absolutely incredible. And it's just, there's no words to explain that. However, when you get involved with LSD, and unless you take the culture of ergot and make the ergotamine tartrate or ergotamine precursors yourself, I wound up in a situation where I was dealing with the black market, and there the knives and guns were drawn, and at one point I even faced kidnapping threats because somebody thought I was their golden goose. And
so even, because you kind of think that the psychedelic world is sort of separate from that sort of darker side.
that's exactly it. I mean, Eric Sturley wrote in Entheogens in the Future of Religion, there was his chapter in there about the idea of us being soft targets or training targets in the war on drugs, us, the entheogenic community, because we are so trusting and are so compassionate and forgiving and open. And it was one of those things I was not prepared. I was so naive when I walked into that situation. I was just a happy, blissful psychedelic chemist thinking I was just going to have a beautiful time, and I wound up in a weird situation that I vacated from as fast as possible.
And you also, of course, ended up being arrested. I mean, what were the circumstances of your arrest? How did you come to it?
Well, I basically got grasped up by somebody I knew from high school. He saw the liberty interest in trading his knowledge about me for his history. So he sold to the DEA, and the DEA then talked to the other authorities throughout the world to try to track me down. It took them a few months to figure out where I was, and they started following me. So they followed me for about 3 months, and then about 6 weeks intensively they were in the horse box out across the yard, more than the yard, across the farm out there. And I was in the Sanctuary Cafe in Brighton, some of you might know it, and ironically, it was not a sanctuary that night. This guy that was way too clean cut for the crowd of hippies I was standing in came up to me and said, Mr. Hardison. And by the end of that utterance, I knew exactly what was going on. I knew I was being arrested. I was high at the time anyway. And I just felt it. And by the end of that sentence, I just looked at him. I said, all right, how do you want to do this? And complete acceptance. This was my fate. This was my moment. And he said, as calmly as possible. I'm like, good, let's do it as calmly as possible. So we managed to pick up and get out there. He put me in a paper suit and gave me a cup of tea, which is a lot different than the U.S. system where they'd throw me on the ground and scream bag.
Very civilized, we love it from the UK.
Yeah.
And so you made it as a trial, took 2 decisions, like first of all to plead not guilty, and then also secondly to represent yourself with having a barrister representing you in court. I mean, both of those made kind of quite unusual decisions given that you were caught red-handed, and it's often unwise enough to have a barrister to represent you. So could you talk why you made those decisions?
Well, I mean, I started from a very simple principle that, I was intrinsically innocent of whatever they were saying I had done. What I had done was an expression of my freedom as a human being. And I thought, they weren't balancing. They were approaching the whole aspect like I was out killing people, like somehow I was causing harm to humanity by my actions, and they were trying to stop that. They weren't accepting the fact that it was personal responsibility. They weren't accepting the fact of that there are benefits to these things, and they were saying alcohol and tobacco are great. These things are not, and I had to stand up against that. It was just an unjust law, and I had to stand up against it. And I had to stand up for, I wanted to stand up for the right to alter my mental functioning, right to make molecules, to have the equal right to brew my drug of choice.
And what about the fact that you chose to forego
Well, my barrister wanted to just basically plead whatever the prosecution offered, which was certainly not in my integrity because I hadn't done some things that the prosecution was offering for a plea bargain. The barrister also wanted he did not yet have Queen's counsel. He was not yet a QC, so he didn't have silk. So he was speaking with a forked tongue, speaking for the Queen. Walsh trying to represent me, and I did not think that was a good way to go. And I asked him if he could represent me on the basis of cognitive liberty and equal right human rights. And he said he could not without being embarrassed. I said, well, then it's best we end our relationship. And it was at that point that I knew I had to represent myself.
And so the concept of cognitive liberty underpinned your defense. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, I picked up on the cognitive liberty concept from Richard Glenboire, or however you say his name, RGB. And he had a organization called alchemine.org, which became cognitivelibерty.org, and he wrote a series of articles called On Cognitive Liberty. I recommend them to everybody in this audience, On Cognitive Liberty. And he basically applied John Stuart Mill's on liberty principles about as long as we harm no one else, we have the right to do with our body as we see fit. He applied that to mental functioning, and he applied that to psychedelic drugs and mental functioning. And when I saw that concept, which I actually think might derive quite earlier, maybe Thomas Roberts, I knew that I had to, I knew in that jail cell that I had to stand up for that principle because nobody else was at that time was going to do it. And the other idea I had was that the idea of drug discrimination, the idea that the majority prefer alcohol and tobacco, the majority of society, and they vote and they pay money and they pay taxes. The minorities are prosecuted or persecuted for their drugs of choice. And so with that twin pillar, I went to the judge and argued for 2 weeks in front of the judge about this, and he said, no, you can't put that to the jury. I'm ruling against it, and that's all there is to it.
So, I mean, ultimately, and maybe as you say, because of the fact that the jury actually don't get to hear an awful lot of your arguments, the jury eventually finds you not guilty after a 10-week trial, and then the judge hands down a 20-year sentence, which is the longest sentence that's ever been decided to manufacture in the UK. I mean, why do you think that was? Why do you think you got such a hefty sentence?
My favorite pet theory actually starts with something that David Luke sent to me. David Luke sent me this letter. It says, it just goes to show you how much they fear the unconscious contents of our mind. And I think that's just absolutely correct, because that, the authorities or those in power are concerned that if we liberate our mind, we'll stop listening to them and bad things will happen. It'll be Hobbesian, bread and tooth and claw, and the whole world will break down. And the psychedelic 60s sure helped impart that kind of information with all the riotous behavior that came out of that time. I think this is an old message. This is the message of Jonathan Ott's pharmacratic imposition as well, which is the idea that, religion and authority and those in power have tried to control our minds so as to constrain our thinking. These are prescribed books. We got copyright for the same reason. They want to control ink blots on paper, and here they want to control thoughts in our mind. And that's my pet theory, but I think it comes down to the DEA, Interpol, Europol, the National Crime Intelligence Squad. They all said it's the most sophisticated laboratory they'd ever busted. And whilst it wasn't sophisticated selection equipment, I was making several different molecules at the same time, and that's what they were so concerned about. They'd never seen a multi-drug laboratory. And so I think that's the basis. Are we still here?
Yeah, sorry. Dennis, can you hang on a second? We're running a little bit late.
Okay, no problem. Shall I hang up?
Yeah, I'll call you back in a minute. Sorry about that, guys.
Hi, Dennis.
Oh.
Hi, Dennis.
Oh, it's gone. I don't want it to crash with two channels.
Can you hear us still?
Yeah, you're back in.
You can see us. All right, good.
Yeah.
Well, there was that idea that they were like, oh, it's a very sophisticated laboratory, and you were making lots of money and you didn't pay us taxes. But I think, it might really boil down to what my brother said. Nobody likes a smart ass.
Yeah, probably more like
That's why I got 20 years.
How do you cope with serving such a long sentence? I mean, I guess what I'm kind of interested in as well is whether or not your previous experience with psychedelics helped with that.
Absolutely. Dennis's brother, Terrence, so you might know, said on his deathbed that he was our camera's off. Said on his deathbed basically that psychedelics helped prepare him for death, and I was experiencing a civic death of sorts. I was being ripped out of the human community and thrown in a box, and it was really difficult to be that disconnected so fast emotionally, but I had to simply on a daily basis carry through, keep breathing deep as possible, and trust the process like any other good psychedelic trip. And life finds a way. I found a way in there of through my craftiness and my willingness to shove a cell phone up my ass for several years. I was able to keep in contact with many of you in that audience, and keep my community alive, keep my conversations alive, keep myself in existence to some extent. And through that, one of those phones, I received a phone call one night from a very lovely woman who would become my wife and my interviewee. And it's exquisite.
You made me go pink. And so, I mean, what would you say was the most valuable lesson you learned in prison?
I think the most valuable lesson that I've learned in prison, I think maybe even possibly in life, is that I am responsible for my mental landscape. The weather I create in my head is of my creation. I want to program that intelligently. And prison was a proving ground. I was able to have true freedom of mind in prison. I was able to experience the joy and the wonder of being alive, even in a prison cell. And my thoughts are free and subject to no rule. And they caged the body, but they certainly didn't cage the mind there.
I guess it's all that's really free. If you know you can do it there, then you're pretty confident you can do it in most other situations that you're going to face that.
Absolutely.
So you were released in May of this year. So how does freedom feel after 9 years, 3 months, 2 weeks?
Freedom feels ace. I mean, it's fantastic. I'm not sure I can put it into words what freedom really feels like. We've been doing our best to find out, wilderness hot springs, hiking mountain peaks, going through national parks, watching baby otters play. Just fantastic stuff, absolutely beautiful. And, we're just open, we're here, we're now, and ready for whatever possibilities bring us. And I suppose that is what freedom is about. Just being ready, just being open, just being here, and just being now. It's ready to play.
I'm basically done, but I just thought I'd give you the opportunity, before we open it up to questions, if there's anything I haven't asked you that you wanted to say, anything we haven't covered.
Yeah, I want to go back to Eric Sterling's point about us being soft targets or training targets in the war on drugs. Behind every molecule that's been synthesized by a chemist that we've stuck in our head for psychedelic effects is a human being that has risked their freedom to do just that. And one in particular, it moves me to speak of it, serving 2 life sentences without the possibilities of parole for making LSD to feed our heads. And his name is William Leonard Picard. And there are so many others that are in prison for small, one guy's in for like 4,000 hits. He's doing 38 years in an American prison, an American gulag. And I can't remember his name right now, but there's a great article out there called Halpern Gate 2, Voices Behind Bars. Voices Behind Bars, Halpern Gate 2. It's in the Entheogen Review. And, I'm grateful for whoever that chemist was that made my first, and I believe it quite possibly was Picard that made my first acid. I got off lucky. I'm not doing life without parole. I'm not going to die in prison because I made acid. I'm free, I'm alive, I'm 42, the whole world is available. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Do you want to open up some questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'd just quite quickly like to say whilst you guys are here, but I've remembered because I did a really terrible introduction there, sorry about that. But, Casey, you're kind of partly responsible for this whole conference, if you can hear me. You're partly responsible for this whole conference because the reason that the first one got put together in the first place is because a bunch of us got together, we wanted to do our own little one-day event, and I was going to put on a one-day event. Because you've been in prison, it was when you came into your 7th year in prison, and it occurred to me that that this kind of is a bit of a trope that you change every cell in your body in the space of 7 years, and it's like, you're not even the same guy they locked up, at a molecular level, and so they should at least let you out on that, for that reason. but you know, just glad to see you didn't do the full 20, and I'm so pleased you're out. I mean, it's an absolute travesty. But I'd just like to open up to the floor, so if some people have got anything.
You might have to repeat the question.
Sorry?
You might have to repeat the question.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody? Yeah.
Just nothing. Anyway, sorry. Why did you only serve 9 years and not the full 20?
Why did you only serve 9 and not the full 20?
Well, when I got sentenced, I was actually going to serve 2/3 of 20, but in 2008 they created an act that changed the scheduling upon which my offense, quote unquote, was placed. And basically said anybody who's on that schedule got out at half time, which is 10 years. But then I was a foreign national, so I got that 270-day foreign national discount. So that so that Charles Clark from Tessagel and everybody else has been serving in the Home Office, and Theresa May could look good. They wanted to send us home early as foreign criminals to get us all out of here, but they wanted to pay us money to do it, which I thought was quite convenient.
If you don't fight deportation, they give you another 9 months after to try and stop you fighting deportation.
Exactly. Allegedly, it might save taxpayer money.
Okay. Andy first.
Right, firstly, can you say hello to Casey from me?
Yeah, but you can come down if you want.
No, it's right. Secondly, can you ask him what music he used in the creation of his chemicals?
Right, excellent. Okay, so it's hello from Andy Roberts. First of all.
Shut the music.
Yeah, what music did you listen to in the creation of your chemicals?
Well, I listened to a lot of music, but in particular, when crystallizing, I preferred Shin Shai. I Sense Your Presence.
He's a guy who
And he's the guy I helped fly over, helped import into the United Kingdom for the purpose of singing to my molecules. Anyway, his name is Shim, S-H-I-M, S-H-A-I, and the album is called I Sense Your Presence, and it's a secret track at the end of the album. It starts at about 12:21 on the last track. And it's very high. It's basically very conscious singing.
Donald?
Casey, can you hear me?
I certainly can.
Hello!
Hello.
After 9 years and 3 months approximately, how long does it take to get back to work?
What do you mean? Yes, I've never missed emailing people and not working. I think it's going to take me at least until October.
Oh, you got it, Captain.
To clarify,
I'm going to be working in the Tetons, in the Jackson Hole area, working on using Paul Stamets' micro-remediation technologies, or concepts, to condition soil for appropriate growth of trees and other fauna. And that will be my job as of October 1st, but I'm sure I'll be doing all sorts of proselytizing of all sorts of theogenic and psychedelic type stuff.
proselytizing.
Yeah, I'm proselytizing. I'm out of the making.
I'm doing his wife rehabilitation program and just here to make sure that he stays on the straight line.
So you're doing a brilliant job, Charlotte.
Hi Charlotte, it's Lara, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thanks to you.
Hey, I was just wondering, hi Casey, nice to meet you. I was just wondering if you can say something about the work that you were doing that Charlotte's told us all about with regards to when you were basically dissecting the letter of the law.
Well, you know what I really want to say? I went into the process of the court process, getting arrested, thinking that the Misuse of Drugs Act was bad, that there was something wrong with it. And what I found out was that there was something wrong with the way the executive was administering. The actual letter of the law stands on our side. It says that a legal regulated market can be made under the Misuse of Drugs Act, 1971, with...
We're not coming for
They can sell cannabis at booths if they want it, under the Misuse of Drugs Act. It's all in there. And if you need to know more about it, obviously, there's drugequality.org. We've dissected it there, my documents are there, and I could get an email communication if somebody wanted to pursue it quite effectively. We tried. Daryl and I put a lot of effort into it, and I put immense amount of effort into it from my jail cell. I put hours and hours and hours, and it's all dissected. It's all there. It's basically the Home Secretary is not administering the act correctly. We need to wrestle the act away from the Home Secretary. It needs to go to the Health Secretary. But that's about it. I don't know what else to say about that at the moment. I'd rather not get too technical.
Thank you.
I've got 5 minutes, Dave says.
Sorry about that. We're going to have to schedule in for a whole longer session. We've got a lot of talking to do.
All right, next question.
Meanwhile, Craig.
Mr. C, can you hear me?
Hey!
Woohoo! Mr. C!
I was wondering where we're going to go for our next hot air balloon night.
When did you get that?
When are we going to go on this hot air balloon ride? You know, the moment I saw you, I thought about our hot air balloon ride. That was epic. We wound up in Rachel's backyard. Rachel, raise your hand.
I can't get you.
Strangely enough, we started off from somewhere in the middle of nowhere and wound up in Rachel's backyard.
I can't get to your country. Well, let me in. You can't get to mine, so we have to find another.
We have to meet somewhere in the middle now.
We can do France.
France sounds good. Or Spain.
Yeah. We'll find something, Craig. Don't worry about it. We'll get there.
Alright, I have a question. Did the phone have buttons on?
The phone had buttons on it.
Did the phone have buttons on it?
Yeah.
I'm very worried about what Casey's arsehole would look like. It's normal.
Hi, Casey and Charlotte. It's Melissa. Don't know if you can hear me. It's lovely to see you both. As a bit a bit more serious, I just kind of wanted to ask, like, during all that time, how were you, well, I suppose you were able to keep your sense of self and your sense of beliefs and, like, your integrity during all that time, even though you weren't necessarily able to influence anyone in the establishment during that time. Did you have an effect on, like, the prisoners or even the prison staff?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was, I started quite early as the jailhouse lawyer. People got to seeing my stuff and really respecting it, and that built over time to where I was, holding court a lot of the time as, I don't know, a sage of sorts to a lot of individuals. There were a few that were quite high and, quite, aligned and enlightened in prison. But for the majority, there was a lot of people, needing people to listen to them and speak with them. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy of the prison system that we rip people so far out of their conversations. It may be necessary for a really abrupt rip out of their conversations for the actions that they've taken. But if we ever want to integrate them back into society, we have to integrate them back into the conversations of their life that support them and uplift them. But in prison, I kept myself really busy. I read The New Scientist every week, An Economist, I read The Times every day, I watched the BBC News, I watched the Daily Politics, I watched BBC Parliament. I was active. I did a physics degree, I was active, I studied most of a law degree. I was just using my mind as I see fit, and using my mind in a way that I knew was possible. I just put the discipline in, the patience, and the time, and I just made it happen.
It's amazing.
I guess I'm a bit worried about this. Well, I guess, this is quite a good sign. It's like, you talk about doing time. You're definitely, I'm afraid, out of time.
Damn it.
I know.
Hey, what was really funny about prison, right? That last 6 months, I was like, fuck, I'm not going to get everything done.
They could keep you in a bit longer.
It was really strange. I'm running out of time on my sentence to just relax and read the stuff I want, and now I'm back in the real world where there's more conversations and more stuff going on. And I wouldn't trade it. It's fucking fantastic. I love this.
Yeah, I'd love to keep this going for ages. I could. Yeah, it's amazing. It's brilliant to see you've got your liberty, Casey. I can't imagine how that must feel. You don't really know what liberty is until you lose it, and it must be fantastic.
Good at it.
And you got the look of a great woman there as well, so it could have been.
Yes, I certainly did. Thank you very much. I mean, you Dave, have an understanding, a small understanding of what it's like to lose liberty and to regain it. And, you know, I really don't think mentally it is much different. Physically, my ability to roam around and make love and see and breathe nature is incredible. It's absolutely wonderful. At the same time, the physical and mental freedom that can be had anywhere on the earth, in the privacy of your own mind, sometimes, is here and now and available to everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.